right. Welcome to Comrade Uncle. I'm here with my uncle.
And your comrade.
And my comrade. And Dr. Layoun. Right. Yeah, man. So we are here to talk about a variety of interesting topics, including Senate Bill 1580 that just passed in Florida and is pretty ridiculous and obscene, and a bunch of other stuff. So, where do you want to start? Where should we start?
Well, we had this bill, Senate Bill 1580, which is now passed, been signed by Governor DeSantis, is part of the law in the state of Florida. It's called the Medical Freedom and Conscience Protection Act. And
whenever they put freedom.
Susan, we're recording. You can't.
No, she can. That's okay. I like it.
No, we're recording. Yeah. But okay.
Yeah,
okay.
No,
it's like
I like it
from the peanut gallery.
Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, that comment is correct. Whenever the Republicans put freedom in anything, you know it is the exact opposite of what they're saying. But we had spoken in a previous episode when we talked about the beginnings of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, about physicians, nurses who refuse to care for people who might have HIV/AIDS, who might be drug users, who might be gay, who might be Haitian. And I live that reality. This is not stuff that I have read, although I have read it. But I have lived that reality while I was at Cook County Hospital in Chicago in the early 1980s. There was actually a great deal of ethical discussion about this, and it was deemed ultimately that while, yes, nurses and physicians are not obliged to put themselves at risk to die to care for others, that short of that, our job is to take care of sick human beings who come to us, full stop. Just full stop.
Right.
We also, I believe, discussed some work that I had done in Latin America and also in the early 1980s. Mm-hmm. And at one point in that work, this is in 1980, 1981, in what was at the time revolutionary Nicaragua, when I was working for the Ministry of Health, under another volunteer who was a Cuban intensive care physician. And I think the listeners may remember, may not, but I'll just briefly run through this. One day after we had finished in-hospital work and this massive clinic we had, it wasn't much of a clinic, I'll just remind you. It was an outdoor area where a couple hundred people would show up, and we'd do the best we could to take care of their problems. But it was better than the nothing they had under the dictatorship of Anastasio Somoza. But one night after all that was over, we gathered around, I forgot exactly where we were, but we gathered around this fire. We're drinking rum and beer and smoking cigars and cigarettes. And yes, I know it's not good for you, but at the time, yeah, you know, we were doing
rum.
And a young colleague of mine, probably the same age as me at the time, late 20s, early 30s, Nicaraguan kid who was a bit drunk, perhaps, pointed his index finger at me and said, you know, you, it's your fault. If you had only allowed Somoza, the dictator, to die when he came to Miami for his heart attack, we would have never had this revolution. Right. And again, we've I think gone through this in the previous episode, but
no, we don't even have that one out yet, so that's upcoming. Okay. It's good that you're mentioning it now.
Okay, but the chief, our chief, Ricardo Morales was the guy's name. He has since died. Says to the young Nicaraguan physician, I was standing there with kind of my mouth agape, not knowing quite what to say. He said, no, compañero. He said, no. We take care of anybody. We take care of everybody. because we're physicians. If Hitler himself came to us, we'd care for him. We, of course, would turn him over to the authorities afterward, but we would take care of him like he was any other patient. That concept, which was lost for a while during the AIDS epidemic, I think organized medicine found out. And that concept that we care for everybody, that our biases, our fears should not play a part in the provision of medical care. That really stands in stark contrast to what's going on with Senate Bill 1580. Because with the Republicans, and it is indeed the Republicans who have done this, the Republicans in the state of Florida and their governor, what they have done is they have made it possible for any physician or nurse or lab or the EMS providers or the pharmacy or the insurance company, any of them, to deny, or the hospital itself, to deny care to anybody based upon their central, based upon their, to provide, they have the right, the wording is exactly, it's the intent of the legislature to provide the right of medical conscience for healthcare providers and payers to ensure that they can care for patients in a manner consistent with their moral, ethical, and religious convictions. That's the wording. And of course, there is never a definition of this. There is no definition. So one could say that, as was said 40 years ago in Chicago, at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, this is against my belief. I don't want to care for people who might be gay because it's against my moral beliefs. I don't believe in, quote, being gay, unquote. That kind of decision making did occur. It did occur. I was present when it occurred. I saw even resident staff behave that way. And when I came to Florida, at the University of Florida, I saw resident staff continue to behave that way related to people who had HIV, AIDS. And so the fact that this law, that this law is passed, it provides this extremely vague allowance for anybody in healthcare, essentially anybody, to say, I will not provide care because it offends my religious or ethical or moral sensibilities. It's really extremely dangerous. I mean, and one can begin to think, I believe that this was aimed directly at the heart of the trans community, is what I believe. But it's so vague that it can be used in any way that one wants. In any way. That one wants.
Right. I was thinking, denying abortion, denying you could not give somebody condoms. It seems like, right?
A pharmacist
I don't believe in contraception.
A pharmacist could say that I don't believe in contraception and I therefore am not going to provide birth control pills or condoms because I don't believe in premarital sex or sex that is that's done outside of the idea of creating a new life. There is simply no recourse if that's the case. The law, the way the law is written, and it may be challenged. The ACLU of the state of Florida, in the state of Florida, is challenging it.
Right. Well, like a lot of the stuff they're trying to, what they want to do is get it kicked up, ideally to the Supreme Court, where their friendly, buddies on the Supreme Court can be like, oh yeah, no, it's totally legit.
I believe that's in fact, I believe that's true.
Part of
that's
it.
Probably their ace in the hole. So it is being appealed by the Florida ACLU. But what patient is going to be able to find, they go to a physician and the physician says, I can't care for you because you want birth control? I mean, they have to find somebody else. If they're locked into an insurance plan that's got selected providers, they may be out of luck. And furthermore, it's not like there's a clinic on every on every corners. The
access.
Hastings Center, the latest piece in the Hastings Center report, argues that this is completely inappropriate, and not just inappropriate, but unethical. Because it compromises patient autonomy, and it flies in the face of beneficence and non-maleficence, which are central principles of medical ethics. And of course, as you'd
explain
expect,
what that is.
Well, the principle of autonomy, which is discussed, I think for the first time roughly around 1917, doesn't come into full bloom for 30 or 40 years after. But it basically, it's the right of a person to control what happens to their body. Full stop. There are details, there's nuance, but that's really what it is. And that is the central issue in medical ethics. I can't give you treatment that you say I don't want. Prior to, decades ago, I could do that. Patients were brought in. Women were brought in. They were sterilized against their will. They weren't even informed about it.
Yeah.
That is considered grossly inappropriate. It's the lack of autonomy relates to both clinical care and research, and this all happened in the last century. So that principle is really extremely important at this point. The other issue, the non-maleficence, is that what we do provide should not harm somebody, and beneficence is that we should provide the care that the patient needs. Full stop. What they need is what we provide. While we may think about, for example, the impact of this patient's care on the national health budget of a country that's got a national health system, which of course we don't. While we may think about that in our administrative roles, while we're providing patient care, that is not an issue that we think about. What we think about is what this patient needs and how we can get it for them. Full stop. So this bill, that's now law, flies in the face of all of that. And of course, one of the other principles is social justice, right? It's autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and social justice. And the social justice component of medical ethics is a little challenging to deal with because of the way our health system is set up. But clearly, this bill, now law, flies absolutely in the face of the principle of social justice. Because any payor, any hospital, any clinic, any laboratory, any ambulance service can say, well, it's against my moral beliefs to care for you. And that's the end of that. You're in a car crash. You're drunk. You shouldn't be drunk in a car crash. You shouldn't be. But you're in a car crash and you're drunk. It is possible, given the way this law is written, for an EMS provider to say, I don't believe in drinking and driving is against my central moral beliefs, and I am therefore not going to take you to hospital. We're not going to provide care at the scene. It's so vague that many things could happen. So this is extremely dangerous bill, and it is now law in the state of Florida. What's also clear is that while there's no definition of what medical conscience means, and while the law does state that the law can't be construed as waiving or modifying any duty of a healthcare provider or payer to provide or pay for other services that don't violate their right of medical conscience, it's all so vague, including the part that is relates to EMTALA, the law that states, the federal law, that health institutions and healthcare providers have to provide at least stabilizing care when someone's in an emergent situation. It's entirely clear that may be ignored. So the law itself is seriously problematic. Intriguingly enough, of course, one of the things that the law also states is that the healthcare practitioner will essentially have no discrimination against them, or will not be made to suffer any consequence for failing to refusing to provide care to somebody. And I think what is a bow to the anti-vaccine COVID, anti-vax COVID types from the last pandemic we had. There's no consequence if the provider refuses to provide any medical procedure or service or treatment that may put the patient's health at risk or present a substantial and specific danger to public health or safety, which of course is what the anti-vax crew said about the COVID vaccines. So it opens up just a raft of options for abuse that may come to fruition. We won't know. It's so vaguely written that it's going to be extremely challenging to determine sort of all the implications of this law for at least for a while. As one might expect, groups like Focus on the Family, which is a right-wing Christian organization, has come out and said that this bill allows doctors to collaborate with patients to provide alternative treatments and safeguards the free speech of doctors as if that was ever at risk. Prohibits. There's some other bills as well that prohibit. It's the group Focus on the Family, and they're in their blogs called Daily Citizen. Mm-hmm. Is applauding the bill and a couple of other bills as well, because they stop the World Health Organization, they say, from dictating policy in Florida, as if the World Health Organization dictated any policy. It's like the anti-Sharia laws, right? The whole thing's absurd. That they provide permanent protection against, quote, forced COVID-19 testing, masking, and vaccinations, which is just, utter absurdity. Ban discrimination in providing medical care based on COVID vaccination status. Well, just to be perfectly clear, we took care of, during the height of the COVID pandemic, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients, many of whom, I was in North Central Florida, were not vaccinated and refused to be vaccinated. Many of them died. There was no lack of willingness to care for people who weren't vaccinated. We told them that it was unwise what they had done and they should get the rest of their family vaccinated.
I don't think there was a single instance of that anywhere. I mean, I'll double check, but that you would have heard about that. Are you kidding me?
Right. This law that we're talking about safeguards 1580. So supposedly safeguards the right of free speech for physicians. Again, an absurdity. There's no risk to free speech for physicians. What there has been is physicians and nurses who have promoted what are unsafe, untested, and then when they are tested, remain useless therapies, ivermectin, chloroquine, and so forth. When they have done that, they have been chastised to some extent, not significantly, but chastised to some extent. So there is really no issue about free speech for physicians, but they say this law protects that. And then allows doctors to collaborate with patients to prescribe alternative treatments. Well, I mean, what that is, once again, is ivermectin, chloroquine, stuff that's, simply absurd on its face. And of course, physicians were doing that. And I think it was wrong, because it was pretty clearly proven very rapidly that it was at least questionable, and then that it didn't work at all. Right. We didn't have an awful lot in the so-called medicine cabinet that we had access to initially. Initially, there was no vaccine. There was some antivirals, and then there was antivirals plus steroids. And then there was monoclonal antibodies, which worked for a while. They don't work so well now. But the law attempts to solve a problem, or I think it obfuscates significantly problems that more or less existed in an attempt to, in this specific case, point a loaded gun at the heart of the trans community, but it's way broader than the trans community. It's just that the trans community is weaker than others. And so, of course, the right is attempting to attack them. There are many reasons to oppose this bill. There are many reasons to stand with the trans community. But the most self-serving is that it'll be them first and it'll be us later. That's just the way this always works. Again, there are many reasons to stand with them. The Hastings Center, a guy named Craig Klugman at the Hastings Center, published a piece and that made many of the same points I've made more eloquently for sure. But one of the things he comments on, which I think I'd like to just read briefly because it really matters. And he says, this is important. He says, as educators in the clinic and the classroom, we could advance the message that all patients are deserving of care. When that student in the lecture hall inevitably asks, quote, my religion says that being X is wrong. How can I keep my beliefs and still be a practicing healthcare provider? Unquote. We can let them know that the ethics of their profession overrides their personal biases. And if they can't provide care for everyone, then they should find a new profession. And I think that's exactly the point. If somebody wants to believe that birth control is immoral and unethical, if somebody wants to believe that premarital sex is immoral and unethical, if somebody wants to believe that being gay is a choice and is immoral, there are a million things we could go on. I mean, people are allowed to believe what they want to believe. What they are not allowed to do is compromise the rest of us based upon their belief system. And in the last 100 years, we've seen this over and over and over again. And in just my time in medicine, roughly 40 years, I've seen it rear its head over and over again. HIV/AIDS, abortion, tuberculosis, IV drug users, Haitians, just over and over. What happened with Ebola, what happens with COVID. So can people have their own beliefs? Absolutely they can. If they can't make their beliefs conform, or at least if they can't set their belief system aside so they can care for people who come to them, who need them, if they're going to be healthcare professionals, then they need to find another job. Full stop. So that's what's happening with this now. It is again terribly worrisome, and it's not the only law at all.
Oh, yeah. They're doing a big push. I think now that they got their little, their go ahead. Now that they have a friendly court, not that they ever really stopped the shit, but they just they're really picking up steam.
I mean, the things that they were not saying out loud, they're now saying out loud. I'm sure these are not new beliefs by this group of people, and it may be unfair to. In fact, there's one Republican I know, so it's unfair to paint all of them with the same brush. But the vast majority, at least, appear to support this kind of legal maneuvering to remove the rights of their fellow humans. And while the Dems make all sorts of mistakes, and they at least generally don't do things like this. But this is just huge. What is a problem, though, is while the Democrats in the state of Florida, the organized Democratic Party, is fighting and has fought very diligently against this and these laws that are like this, they're in the minority because of gerrymandering.
Look, I think it's important to differentiate between state level politicians and national politicians. I think the national Democrats are a good deal worse than not all, but then the local ones certainly can be. There's some very good, very, very good people, and they're who wield a fair amount of power, as we can see with the Republicans. They've gerrymandered their way into power, and they're pushing through all kinds of crazy shit.
Right.
They have power. I mean, not that the National Democrats don't have power; they pretend not.
Well,
to,
and when they had power, they didn't do what needed to be done. I mean, it is the one of the things that's at least vaguely, and I say vaguely because it's really not amusing, but vaguely amusing, is that during the Cold War, we in the United States, certainly our government, used to make fun of the Soviet leadership because they were a bunch of gerontocratic guys. Mm-hmm. All guys, mostly guys, all old. And you look at our leadership now. I mean, from Dianne Feinstein to the president. I mean, and the senior leadership is really senior. Now, I mean, I have nothing against old people, being an old people myself. But there is a time, right? There is a time when you say, I got to turn over the reins to someone younger and who's got a different outlook than I do. Or at least someone who can, in Dianne Feinstein's case, can do the job. For God's sake.
Yeah, so propped up by a stick behind them.
I mean, it's really quite disturbing. It's both sad, but it's also it's ridiculous. It does nothing for the country and for our people, for sure.
It's not a good tactical move. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. One other thing, the Human Rights Campaign, which is a LGBTQ human rights organization, has points out in their posting on this law that the last time data were released from one of the polls that they do, that 80% of Florida residents supported non-discrimination protections, and 66% of Florida residents opposed refusal of service on religious grounds. Florida is a pretty conservative state, but even the state being this conservative, this is beyond what most people would say should be done. And so it's not just the senior Dems who are out of touch with the people of the United States. That's for sure. I believe, I mean, the organized Republican Party, again, this is as differentiated from at least some individual Republicans, right, who may maintain their beliefs in that party for reasons I don't quite understand. But there is at least one person, that I know of, that is not of the DeSantis ilk. I know of at least one, so I can't say everybody, but the vast majority still support this nonsense. Just like they supported Trump. They may not be racist, for example, themselves. They may not be homophobes themselves, but it's not a defining position that would allow them to no longer support people who are. So
I'm not sure that they have, I think that they have an ideology. I don't think that their professed ideology is necessarily, I mean, they might think whatever the heck, in their personal life, but I mean, they serve capital. I mean, that is their ideology. They'll do whatever the hell somebody pays them to do. I mean, if somebody came and was like, hey, Republicans, we'll pay you as much as the Koch brothers to support drinking milk or, whatever, wearing a pompadour, they would be like, oh yeah, great, this is the best thing ever. You got to do it to protect America. And they'll come up with any rationalization. Where you can see this, a great example of this, or really cracked me up, was, which one was it? Lindsey Graham, I believe it was Lindsey Graham, was, initially kind of against, let me put it this way. As Biden begins the stuff in Ukraine, he kind of he's like, we shouldn't be over there, whatever. And then clearly, somebody jerks his leash, later on, in a later statement, because he was confronted by a reporter, about it. He's like, cause he switches positions 180 degrees. He's like, oh, now we're going, we should be over there. It's great. We should send them lots of money. We got to spend a lot of money. And he so the reporter's like, wait, hey, why did you change your line completely 180 degrees? He's like, and in a moment of rare transparency for a Republican, certainly for Lindsey Graham, he's just like, well, they're they're buying this and that from Lockheed Martin, and then, they're getting all these, there's 500 missiles. And they're like, yeah, but why did you do it? And he just goes, he kind of looks like, they're buying all this stuff.
Right.
The guys who pay me told me.
The two things, I think. One is, I think that the issue of what's happening between Ukraine and Russia and the politics around it in some sense it's complicated. In other sense, it's not so complicated. But in the second hand, I just meant it and I understand. But poor Lindsey, Lindsey Graham. I mean, I don't know what to say about a guy like that. I mean, I don't know what to say about the guy. All I can tell you is, as a human being, I feel for him. That's all I can say. But what I really feel for are the
you would treat him.
I would treat him. Who I really feel for are the people in this state and in other states, because this law will be picked up by other right-wing governors and made into law in their states. It's not so easy, depending on whether you have insurance or not, depending on whether you have Medicaid, state-sponsored aid or not. It's not so easy to find a physician. And again, simply because of the way this health system works, there's not clinics on every corner. I mean, we could do that. We could have a proper health system, which we don't have. But you can't find people. So it's not going to be so easy for people to find a physician to care for them. If in fact that physician decides that because of that they're gay or trans or brown or black. Now, you're not supposed to be able to
or their insurance or their health network. I mean, like if they're it doesn't even matter what the doctor thinks. Maybe the doctor's willing, maybe the doctor's not willing. But if your insurance, the only people that you can go see, and your insurance company is like, hey, fuck you, we're going to do X. Then there you have no option. Where are you going to go? You're going to go down the street. You're going to change insurance companies? Yeah, right.
Right.
Maybe you only I only have one choice, basically.
Sure. No. This is true. I mean, it ranges from the individual clinics and providers to the labs, to the hospital, to the EMS system, to the insurance companies. So all of them are protected. Who's not protected are our fellow citizens. They're not protected.
Right.
And that is really very, very much a frightening thought, given what happens in the country today. So could we fix this? Yeah. Well, the answer is, of course we could fix it. And the way we fix this is, I believe, with national legislation, national anti-discriminatory legislation, full stop. Again, if you and I are colleagues in a hospital, we're both physicians, right? And there's something that I feel uncomfortable taking on. And uncomfortable can be for a million reasons. It may be because I've only done 30 procedures and you've done 100. And so I don't want to hurt anybody. I can certainly go to you and say, hey, listen, would you cover this for me? Would you take care of this patient for me? Talk to the patient, tell them why, let it happen. That happens all the time. And sometimes it happens because an individual clinician may be uncomfortable with what's specifically requested. That does happen today. But we are mandated to find somebody else. The way this law is written, explicitly, if I don't like what someone's asking for, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to refer them to you. I don't have to refer them to anybody. I just say no, against my morals and ethics. So we could fix and it really is a minor piece where an individual clinician's morals, ethics might be compromised. We can fix that. I mean, we can take care of that issue with something that's nowhere near as terrible as this law. And we could make sure that people our fellow citizens have access to high quality and safe healthcare when they need it. Then the way we would do that is of course, through a Medicare for All provision that has been laid out, Bernie Sanders, but others as well. Physicians for National Health Program, which I belong to, by the way, has laid this out for years and years and years and years. We could do this. We can do this. We can afford to do this. In fact, it would save significant money. Significant money. It would pay for itself significant money. There's just no question about it. The data exist. Yeah. And the quality and safety issues, accessibility issues, all of those would be improved. I believe it's the Kaiser Family Foundation does a study every handful of years on the top 11 countries in the world, richest countries in the world, and on their health system. And in every single solitary one of those studies that have gone on, I believe they started around 96, but I could be off on that. But the latest one was, I believe, in 2019, 2020. The United States is number 11 out of 11. I mean, every year we're the most expensive, with the least access, the poorest quality, full stop. I mean, we can fix this. Again, we've talked in the past about the outcome, the output of a system is the output that the system was designed to give. And the output of our health system is the output that this health system was designed to give. It does make a handful of companies and individuals extremely wealthy, mostly companies and companies. But in terms of providing appropriate care, preventive, and so forth, to our citizens who become patients who need health care, we're not so good. And it's disturbing today. It was disturbing 40 years ago, and it will be disturbing long after I'm gone until we fix it. And we fix it, I think, with a national health system. It could have multiple configurations. We talk about Medicare for all, which is essentially the feds being the insurer of choice, everything else more or less existing the way it is today. But it could look like the German or Dutch system, where there is a federal option, but there's also private, not-for-profit insurance companies. It could look like the British system, in which the state, until recently at least, owned the hospitals and employed the doctors and everything. There's a
I would prefer that,
deal of there's a great every system, every one of these systems has got its own sets of issues that we'd have to deal with. Nothing is panacea. Nothing is perfect. Right? We would still struggle, no matter what, with making sure that what was needed for our people was obtained. There's no question about it. But better doing that with the feds, right? Or even, frankly, a not-for-profit insurance company than with a bunch of for-profit institutions whose bottom line is the bottom line. Right. So again, my for me at least, Medicare for all is what I'd like to see. But this is something that we could discuss. I mean, there are options.
As a bare minimum.
Yeah. There are other options. So anyhow, that's the one of the disturbing things that's happening on our horizon here in Florida. But
Ron DeSanctimonious at it again.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. It's no, there's ways to do it. It's ridiculous that we're not doing it. It's a scam. It's a setup where we've been duped. These guys are, all these guys are in the pocket of these big insurance companies, and like you said, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. This is how when you make it a business, you put profits before people. Of course, people are going to come last, and then as a logical extension of that, why not shrink the amount of people, if nothing else?
Sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, again, I think in the sense of shrinking the number of people who have access, I think again to focus, like a laser beam, as they say, on this bill. The attack is clearly on the LGBTQ community, without a doubt, in my mind. But it's simply the tip of the spear that will go. It's women's health. It's you name it. This will be used to attack all of us. And I cannot get out of my mind Pastor Niemuller's poem, right? Which it's not that I think that Adolf Hitler is Ron DeSantis or vice versa. It's not that. But the concept is really important. At first, they came for the communists, but I wasn't a communist, so I didn't do anything. And then they came for the trade union workers, but I wasn't a trade union worker, so I didn't do anything. And then they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't do anything. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to do anything. And I think that's the issue. Again, there are many, many moral, ethical reasons that we stand arm in arm with our trans community, LGBT community, with women, with working people, with people of color.
Absolutely.
A million reasons. But even if you say, I can't see those reasons, I don't know how you could, but even if you were to say that, it's in our own interest to basically stand with those groups, because it will be us eventually. It will be us. So
absolutely. Even and if you want the moral, as a good leftist, if you are a good leftist, then and you're like, well, this is a small whatever. I don't want to set up a straw man for it. But there's always an injury to one is an injury to all. There's always Thomas Sankara once famously said, there can be no liberation without women's liberation. I think that extends to all oppressed people, and there can be no liberation without trans liberation. It is liberation.
Either
for one
there's
is
justice
liberation
for all, or there's no justice. I mean, it's all true. It's all true. It's all true. And and interestingly enough, I'm reading Angela Davis's Women, Race, and Class, and she goes through the history of the attempt to obtain the vote for women and what were formerly slaves, black people. And there was the dichotomy of women who at some point didn't want to allow African American men to have the vote if they didn't have the vote, and the way that was used to compromise both groups. I mean, it's not a slam. I mean, it is in some sense a critique of the women of that time, some of the women at least, that were leading the suffrage movement. But the only point is, it's not really to criticize them now. I mean, they're gone. Is to say, to use as an example that we stand together, arm in arm, to fight off the attacks on the weakest among us, or we'll be taken down one at a time. That part is
right. Clear. Right. Yeah. The divide and conquer, that is absolutely. I mean, I saw that here, and talk about trade unionism, right? Like that's exactly what they did and was what Walker and his buddies did in Wisconsin. They tried to split everybody up, and that is, I think you see that a lot. I think you see that a lot, even covertly. There's certainly, I mean, like what we saw with COINTELPRO, this effort to sow division amongst the left is big, and you do see that. I mean, you do see that. It's like
you may want to define that. I'm not sure that's from almost a generation ago. I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know if everybody remembers that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. It was this program that our government ran. FBI. There was mirrors in the CIA. And was it this FBI? Whatever. Our state apparatus. Yeah. To run. Counter information. Basically, let me break it down, I guess. They would infiltrate leftist groups, and then either push them to be radicalized and arrested or attacked or whatever, or just sow division, or break them up in any way possible, disrupt them. And it was extremely effective. They did it to the Black Panthers. They did it to Martin Luther King. They did it to all these guys, all these groups, all these socialists, all these communists, all of them were completely infiltrated. And people should know that it did not end. It is still absolutely happening. It worked so well. Why the hell wouldn't they do it? One of their, so here's something to watch out for. One of their kind of bywords, one of the things that were, a central directive was to get in there, go into meetings, and derail people, push them onto topics that were fucking a bad look. Frankly, I think stuff like abolish the police might be a good example. Who knows? Maybe it came up organically. Maybe they amplified it. maybe whatever. And it's not that I don't agree with fundamentally and radically reforming our approach to the justice system. That's not it. It's it's a fucking bad slogan. It's not fucking scares people. I don't, oh, are you fucking kidding me? No, absolutely not. So, it's that sort of shit. That's what they did. And this was back in the 70s, 60s, 70s. And they would, they would make, sort of like push very, in little shitty weaselly ways, to create, to undermine the left, to undercut them, to make them look foolish, to make them fight amongst each other. And I think you still see it. I think you still see it with the leftist the sort of Western chauvinist leftist, the sort of insular nature, the sort of the talky downy, like the sort of academic elitism. I think it's all, it's an infection, in American leftism particularly.
Well, I mean,
I think that covers it.
I know there's not much to disagree with there. One of the things I think it's important to I think your example of the defund movement or segment of the movement, that's a really intriguing thought, which I must admit I hadn't had. I thought it was
that's speculation.
Phrased,
I don't know for
sure. No. But I thought it was phrased poorly. But that's intriguing. One of the things it's just clear. There's a whole history written about it when you talk. Because you mentioned Martin Luther King, that the FBI clearly sent him what we would call now night letters. I think that basically said, right, commit suicide. You've had affairs. We're going to make this clear, and you're a communist. And commit suicide. This is documented. So it's not a supposition. It is clearly documented that this is what our state apparatus was involved with in the COINTEL program. So I think it is important to keep that in the back of our mind. That history shouldn't be lost. That history needs to be remembered. And I think you're right about the sort of drift, if you will, of the left in the United States. We've got, and I consider myself a human of the left. We have our own issues for multiple reasons that have to do with both us, but also the history of the left movement in this country. So there's a great deal we have to work on. Now, I think
not to get us too far afield.
No, not to get us too far afield. But the international left. Remember May 1st, May Day, the struggle for the 8-hour day. Yeah. That comes from here. International Women's Day. That comes from here, as well as other places. But we've got a history that unfortunately many of us just don't know. And I think knowing the history doesn't make everything better, but it at least makes it more possible to think and talk about how we would work together. And again, I think we will have differences. We will have disagreements. That's okay. The general impetus, the general move, though, has to be toward inclusion, not exclusion, and justice, economic and social, for everybody. If we can move in that direction, we'll disagree on some things, on some tactical things, maybe even some strategic things, but we'll move in the right direction. I think that's what we have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Class-based analysis. That's, we talked about the Black Panthers. that was very central to their whole thing. They were not just about empowering Black people. They were talking about class war. They were talking about, poor white people. One of the things we briefly wanted to touch on, it makes me think of this, that thing that happened in New York or whatever, where the Marine choked out some dude who was a homeless guy who was having a mental health breakdown or whatever you want to call it. He was freaking out, right? This guy's on the subway, he's freaking out, and this Marine, ex-Marine, maybe whatever. Anyway, this one of these Semper Fi chuds.
The young guy who was having the mental health episode was a guy named Neely. And the former Marine, he was an African-American kid, homeless, poor, obviously. Yeah. And the guy who put him in the chokehold was this guy whose last name was Dennis. I've forgotten his first name. and it was a vigilante episode on the subway. It was vigilantism, without a doubt. I mean, there's a range of things you can say. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know. But one can become afraid. One can become fearful of what somebody might do. And certainly folks who are having mental health episodes I've seen it in the ED. I've certainly seen it. People who are having mental health episodes and are violent. So it's certainly possible to be afraid. It's certainly possible to want to try and calm somebody down. It's certainly possible to consider that you might need to, hold somebody tightly, put them, wrap your arms around them so they can't hurt somebody else or themselves. All of that's at least possible. That's not the same as putting somebody in a chokehold and killing them.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
absolutely. But my what I wanted to say is a critical point, however, is that it's not while race plays a huge role in it. I do believe that there was a racist element to that. However, there's also a class element. We have completely abandoned the idea of public good for mental health. I mean, forget something as good as Medicare for all or whatever. We open under Reagan and to a different extent under other presidents, we basically ejected all these folks from mental health institutions, which had their problems, into the streets. And the population of homeless people has skyrocketed, especially since COVID. And then there's this other factor of this sort of the immiseration and the cutting back of even folks who get some benefits from the government, whatever, Medicare or whatever. And Biden just fucking, all this shit that he was praised for, he dropped all the sort of COVID subsidies, which I think is despicable. But we've got folks that have mental health issues, or just, we're flooding the streets. We have no safety net for these people. And this is an issue of class. It's not just, I don't know. I've been in scary situations with mentally ill, homeless, white people too. It's not solely that. I mean, like I said, I really do think it played a role in this. But that the reason I said that is just because it's like, it's all encompassing thing. It's this whole thing with capitalism where it's like, that's the need for solidarity. That's why we have to come together. That's why it's not just an issue of being black, or not just an issue of being trans, not just an issue of being a socialist or a communist or even a leftist or anything. It is, it truly is. This is class war being waged, and all these methods of division are just to avoid gaining the basically a class consciousness amongst all these people.
Well, your commentary reminds me actually of two things. One, we talk about this Florida bill, Senate Bill 1580, and how it might be and probably will be picked up by other right-wing governors and states throughout the country. And it's important to remember that Ronald Reagan started his political career as a hack for General Electric, but he was governor of California. And it was in the state of California that he took a problematic system and the institutions for mental health institutions did have problems. They did need to be addressed. There were organizations, and I remember them, that argued very strongly against those institutions because they were abusive. And so there were problems. But what he did was he eliminated the organizations, the institutions. He said that what would happen would be that we would have halfway houses where people could live until they could be on their own, and they would be funded. And then in California, he got rid of the funding for the halfway houses, and people were then homeless. It was a perfect ploy that we fell for. There was a Network Against Psychiatric Assault, NAPA it was called, that talked and wrote eloquently about, and this is in the mid 1970s, as I remember, early 70s, mid 70s, eloquently about the abuses that were going on in these mental health institutions. It needed to be addressed. There's no question about it. No question. But there's also, with all respect to everyone who thinks autonomy, as do I, is important, there are some people who are so debilitated that you can't say to them, okay, just stay on the street, it's all good, never mind, I'll walk away.
Right.
That simply, it's a minority, I suspect, and there's many ways we can address this, not with, it's not a law enforcement issue, but there are some people who need our help, loving help, I would say, and I don't mean it in a mushy way, but that's what it is, to be able to function because they are so disabled, debilitated with mental illness. And there are others who are, and the literature on people who are unhoused / homeless, the people who are acutely unhoused homeless are frequently women and kids who are in abusive situations. Right. So for some, Absolutely. It's not a matter of mental institution; it's a matter of housing, jobs, and safety. Right. So there's multiple ways we can address this. It could be addressed. We refuse to address it, and then we point to the homeless as, see the problem we've got.
Yes,
it's a problem that we allow to fester. There are data. Yeah. Homelessness is a policy decision. Full stop. It's Absolutely. A policy decision we've made not overnight. It wasn't just George W. Bush. It wasn't just Bill Clinton. This has been going on since the neoliberal politic came into existence roughly in the early 70s, very late 60s. And it's a 40-year process. It's been ongoing. So it's not going to be fixed instantly. And my suspicion is that Joe Biden isn't the guy who's going to fix it. But it is a fix that we could do if we so chose. Right? I mean, there is no question about it. And the one thing I would say, for people who would listen to this and they'll say, well, but what do those two know? I mean, they've never had to deal with IV drug users. They've never had to deal with homeless people. I will point out, I fully recognize the difficulties in both examples I just gave, because I have in fact dealt with them in greater or lesser degree for decades now. It's not easy. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but it's the right thing to do. Difficult or not, it's the right thing to do, and that's why we do it, because it's the right thing to do. Of course, it'll be hard. Of course, there'll be missteps. Of course, people of good faith trying to do the right thing will trip over their shoelaces and do something that's wrong. I mean, we have to both demand justice and fairness, but we also have to be empathic and forgiving when we make a mistake, because mistakes get made even when you're trying to do the right thing. And
learn from the past, learn from the past mistakes. My personal connection to a lot of this is, so when there was the Wisconsin uprising, basically Walker gets into power. He passes, I kind of mentioned that earlier. He starts passing along with the gerrymandered his buddies, his Republican buddies in Wisconsin. They pass insane stuff, busting the unions, cutting back all kinds of public of the safety net, everything from infrastructure. I mean, they really went on an all-out attack. It was this idea. It's funded by the Koch brothers, of just going on an all-out assault. It was very impressive. It shows you how much people can get done if they gain power. And the power that is in the local. Anyway, as a result of this,
the governors, states have just dramatic power. We think of this, the feds as having all the power, but in this federal system, the states have significant power to be used for ill or good. Anyway, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're all out, and what happens as a result of that is, first one group and unions, and then, all kinds of groups, and then all kinds of people from throughout the state, in fact, throughout the country, throughout the world, all, converge in an effort. And so we all start protesting, and there's, days It goes from 10,000 people to 30,000 people to 50, 100, 250,000 people. And we're all marching, around the Capitol. We're all protesting and stuff. We occupied the Capitol. As a result of this, because we're on the streets day after day, we come into contact with the homeless population, with the mentally ill, with the, acutely, I don't know. I take meds. I don't mean it as a pejorative. I have mental illnesses myself.
Sure. Mental illness is illness. Full stop. It is.
It is. Right. It's like needing glasses, whatever. But so we're like right there. We're like cheek by jowl with these folks. And like, I know for myself and a lot of other people, that were involved in the uprising, it was impossible to turn away from. There is this idea of the homeless as like, picture a homeless person, right? You get this idea in your head, right? Like, even I, who have all this, intimate contact, and it's like, that's an abstraction, but like the reality is like, these are people's brothers and sisters and daughters and uncles and whatever. And it's like, for the vast majority of them, it's not, first off, nobody fucking chooses to be homeless. Secondly, it's like, they have a house fire, they have, bed bugs. They get bed bugs, and it's like it wrecks everything. It makes this catastrophic cascade of things that can take you from living a nice, comfortable middle class life to being out on the streets in a matter of months. We are precarious. That precariousness leads us to be more conservative. It makes us play into the hands of the ruling class. But setting that aside, so I'm down in the streets. And myself, like a lot of other people, couldn't turn away from this reality that we found. We found this reality, and it was so striking that it was impossible to turn away from. Impossible to just shut your heart off and turn away from these people that were suffering right in front of you. And so, we started this, at first we started doing just direct outreach stuff, like giving people food and blankets. We'd get food that would come in for the protests and stuff, and we would hand it out, of course, to the protesters, but also to all the homeless people who all gathered around. Because we were doing these encampments, they would come in to the encampments and we would see them, and they would interact with us, and we get to know them, as people, not just as a faceless mass. And so, we started doing that, and it got to be, it was cold. We started getting blankets. We started getting jackets. And that kind of evolved. And I wound up starting this, charity with some other people, where we would basically get, around Christmas. Now, I am not a Christmas guy. I'm not a religious guy. I never liked Christmas. But we started this charity just as we saw a need, and we tried to fill it. And because, of course, these attacks were on teachers, as well as all other kind of unions, we had connections inside of the teachers. And so inside of the teachers union, inside of the schools, and they kind of pointed to us this huge gap. There's people, there's presents going to people who are in shelters, but then there's a lot of other people, who are doubled up or living on couches. There's a lot of kids. I mean a stupendous amount of people. It's in the, it's outrageous. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's way more than you would think. Homelessness has skyrocketed, especially since COVID. And so we would gather up presents, and we, I think in the time, my tenure, we served like maybe 10,000 children, of giving them presents for Christmas, and the stuff. You would see shit that would break your heart, man. And people wouldn't be asking for much. They would just be asking for like socks for their little brother or something like that, or just the simplest, littlest things. People aren't asking for Xboxes; they're asking for winter boots.
Right. Right. No, I think what you guys did, and the group of you. I know it wasn't just you, but what you guys did during the uprising when Walker was governor there, I think is really, really important. And I think it simply makes the point that if you look at something and refuse to see it, you won't be touched by it. There's a paper that my colleague and sister and I just wrote on this very issue. Who can take on the suffering of others? Your mom. Yeah, your mom. My sister, my colleague, my comrade sister. Your comrade mom. And we've now submitted. I think you've seen it, haven't you?
Oh yes, I've read it. I read it a number of times.
And the issue is your demand for democracy, right? That's what it was. Can't exclude others who are maybe by some people considered lesser than you guys. You opened arms and said, "We're all in this together." I think that's the way to go. It struck in the closing paragraphs of the paper we just wrote, which was submitted to, I believe it's called Humanities and Sociology. I think it's a journal. It's not been accepted yet, but I probably will be. But in the closing paragraphs of that paper, we touch on the issue of what do you see when you look at something. And we used a still photo of a brave Ukrainian girl standing up to an invading Russian soldier.
Yeah.
And that video and the still shot got millions and millions of likes and looks and clicks and whatever else happens with these things, right? But if you look at the photo very carefully, you go, this is not February in Ukraine. This is like desert, Mediterranean area. Well, what it was this young woman, Ahed Tamimi, standing up to an Israeli soldier when I believe it was her cousin had just been arrested, right? I mean, when it was a Ukrainian girl standing up to a Russian soldier, she was a hero. As soon as it became clear that this was a Palestinian girl, right, standing up to an Israeli soldier, an occupying soldier, it was like, all of a sudden she's not a hero anymore. And in fact, some organizations within Israel, I mean, extreme right, there are, as you well know, some extremely good, extremely progressive organizations within the state of Israel that stand for rights for all.
Yes.
But the right in that country said, well, she like Netanyahu, right? Like, well, she may not even be really a Palestinian. She may just be an actor because look, she's blonde-haired and blue-eyed. Well, I mean, you cannot say things like that if you know anything about the history of the Middle East, right? The Ottoman Empire. Yeah. I mean, you can't say that. But they said it. But as
a light-skinned Lebanese man, tell me about it. The idea of, oh my God.
But the point is what we refuse to see. Yeah. What our and again we touch on the issue of Invisible Man and what he said. People look through their eyes and they refuse to see me. They only see reflections of themselves, and that is in fact, I think, part of what happens, and that's exactly what we have to work against. We have to be big tent. We have to do what you guys did in Madison, which is open arms to all. There will be disagreements and there'll be problems, and it'll make it more difficult, but it's still the right thing to do. And we work through the issues, right? I mean, I think that's what we do while we're watching for, as you also commented upon, the provocateurs that will be placed by some organs of state control. I mean, they will be.
Yeah. That's what happened. That I suspect very strongly that's exactly what happened to us, because it exploded spectacularly. These guys, we had a hostile takeover by a group. It is a long and bleak story. Maybe someday I'll go into it, but I have this sneaking suspicion that it was just it exploded things too dramatically. Not to say that there isn't infighting, in the left. I think that's part of our point here is that solidarity is where it's at. Like that is, and that's how we build power not just by, I don't know, whatever, having meetings or something. Those are great, whatever. Or just talking about shit on the internet. You build power by directly addressing attacks on people and the suffering of people and being like, I am doing this because I am a socialist, because I am a whatever,
because I'm a Christian. There's elements within the Christian movement. That are just as impressive as they can be. And I think we touched on this in a previous episode when I was working in Central America, Nicaragua, in the 80s. The Catholic lay workers that believed in the theology of liberation were more impressive than any young leftist I'd ever seen in my life, and I remember that to this day. I think it would be a useful piece of history to go through what happened with that with your organization at some point in the future.
That's a good idea.
But I think we've gone on for about an hour now, a little over an hour.
That's pretty good.
So we should probably stop here, don't you think?
Yeah, let's do it. And I almost forgot one other thing. We talked about homelessness and big ideas. Here's a big idea for you. How about housing for everybody? Did you know that it actually costs more to keep people homeless than to just give everybody a house? Much like Medicare for all would actually save us money, because right now we pay more for healthcare and get less for it than any other developed country in the world. Homelessness is something that could be easily solved by just giving people homes. Period. Full stop. There's nothing to it, man. Shit like what happened would never have happened if we were doing the smart, the most cost effective, although cost isn't the only motivator. I mean, it would also be cost effective to not have roads, but we fucking have them. Maybe, I don't know, whatever. We should take care of each other. That's what I'm trying to say, is we should take care of each other. But don't let them fool you into thinking that the big ideas aren't possible. Universal housing, universal health care. It might be hard. It might seem impossible to picture from here. But, hey, man, we got to do it. Just like we got to change, just like we got to fix climate change. It has to be done. We have no other choice. 2050, we're going to be in a world of shit. So, while it's easy to become doom-pilled and sucked into the badness and just give up, I mean, I get it. But that's an abdication of responsibility. That means giving up is pretending that you're not responsible for changing the world. Now, you think about, I don't know, for folks my age or younger, you think about the world we're being handed, that is, with this catastrophic climate change, the sea level rising. It is a fucking disaster, and it's easy to get pissed off at earlier generations for handing us a world that is fucking melting down. But they, we are them. Our kids, our next generations, the people that follow us could look at us and be like, what the fuck? Why didn't you do anything? So I think to give up is to, first of all, be a fucking hypocrite. If you give a shit about the climate and are mad that it's not, what's happening is happening. But it's up to us, is what I'm saying. It's up to us to fight against capitalism, to fight for a better world, to save the world, literally save the world. And nobody else is going to do it for us, man. We got to do it. We got to do it, and we got to fight together to do it. And all these little struggles, they're all part of the big struggle. So fight together, look out for each other, do it on every level, from taking care of your friends to taking care of strangers to taking care of people across the world, to fighting for, Palestinians, for whatever, Yemenis. So anyway, that's it. That's all I wanted to say. I love you guys. You're not alone. Keep the fight alive. Stay strong. Keep your head up. And catch you next time.
Up to mighty London came an Irishman one day. As the streets are paved with gold, sure everyone was gay, singing songs of Piccadilly, Strand and Leicester Square, till Paddy got excited, then he shouted to them there, it's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go, it's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye, Piccadilly, farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary.